Have you ever wondered why, even as an adult, there are moments when you suddenly feel small? Maybe you are in a room with others, and your heart beats faster just before you speak. Maybe you hesitate to raise your hand, to share an idea, or to step into something new. Out of nowhere, you feel that same nervousness you thought you left behind years ago. Most of us have felt this. It is that quiet inner voice that says, "Careful. Stay quiet. Don't draw attention. Don't mess up." The voice feels protective, but at the same time, it steals something from us. It steals confidence. It steals presence. It steals the fullness of who we are meant to be. The strange thing is that this voice is not new. It is old. It is ancient within us. It began long before we knew how to name it. For many, it began in childhood. A single comment, a laugh that cut too sharply, a time when someone important dismissed us, and we learned in that moment that being ourselves was not safe. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Childhood shame is one of those hidden forces. It lingers beneath the surface, shaping the way we see ourselves and the world. We do not choose it consciously, but it chooses for us when we do not bring it to light. Think back for a moment. Picture yourself as a child. Maybe you were standing in a classroom, eager to share an answer. Maybe you were on a playground, ready to join in a game. Maybe you were at the dinner table, about to tell a story. And then something happened. A sharp look, a dismissive laugh, a cutting word. In that moment, something deep inside you whispered, "Don't. Don't be too much. Don't risk being wrong. Don't show all of yourself." It might have been such a small moment that no one else remembers, but for you, it planted a seed. And shame, once planted, has a way of growing quietly in the dark. Jung spoke of the shadow self, the hidden part of us where we store the things we want to forget or deny. That is often where shame lives. We tuck it away so we don't feel it every day. But even from the shadows, it has power. It becomes like a leash, gently tugging us back every time we try to step forward. Shame is not always loud. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it shows up in the smallest hesitation, the way we hold back when we want to lean in, the way we smile and nod even when we disagree, the way we shrink just enough so we do not stand out. And here is the truth. That leash does not disappear simply because we grow older. The body grows. The mind learns. the years pass. But the child who first felt that shame is still inside, still waiting for someone to tell them it is safe now. Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that is what shame steals from us, the ability to fully accept ourselves. Because when shame has power, we confuse it with truth. We think the whisper that says, "You are not enough," is a fact. We believe the feeling of smallness is who we are, rather than a shadow cast from long ago. But here is the beautiful thing. Shadows cannot exist without light. The very fact that we feel shame means there is something greater behind it, a self waiting to step forward, a confidence waiting to grow, a voice waiting to be heard. This is not about blame. It is not about digging up every memory. It is about noticing the invisible strings that have been pulling us for far too long. It is about making what was once unconscious conscious. Because the moment you see shame clearly, you no longer have to call it fate. And maybe, for the first time, you can see yourself not as the child who froze on the playground or stayed silent at the table, but as the person who has the power to choose differently today. Chapter 1. Meeting the Shadow. Carl Jung spoke often about what he called the shadow. It is not something to fear, though at first it can feel frightening. The shadow is everything about ourselves that we hide away, everything we reject, everything we are ashamed of. It is the part of us we do not want others to see, and often the part we do not want to see ourselves. Shame lives here. It hides in the corners of the shadow, waiting quietly. And the strange thing is that the shadow is not always dark in the way we imagine. Sometimes it contains the very best parts of us, our boldness, our creativity, our voice, our natural confidence, all the things we pushed down long ago because we thought they were too much or not enough. Think about it like a storage room you locked when you were very young. At first, you only placed 1 or 2 small things inside. A memory that hurt. A feeling that was embarrassing. A dream that someone laughed at. You closed the door and thought you were done. But over the years, every time shame whispered, "Hide that," you tossed another piece of yourself inside, and the room filled up. The shadow becomes heavy because it is full of things we have tried to bury. Yet, as Jung reminded us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The work is not to run from the shadow, but to meet it. Meeting the shadow does not mean fighting it. It does not mean forcing it away. It means turning toward it with curiosity. Imagine sitting across from it at a table. Imagine saying, "I see you. You are part of me. You have been carrying things for a long time." At first, this can feel uncomfortable. Most of us spend our lives avoiding the shadow. We distract ourselves. We push forward without looking back. We keep busy so we do not hear the whispers inside. But when we pause, when we get quiet, we realize how much power those whispers have had over us. Shame, once hidden in the shadow, does not stay silent. It leaks out in small ways. In the hesitation before you share your opinion. In the nervous laugh when you doubt yourself. In the way you shrink in the presence of others. Each time, the shadow tugs on the leash, reminding you of something old. But here is the important truth. The shadow is not your enemy. It is not trying to destroy you. In many ways, it was built to protect you. As a child, you put things there because you needed to feel safe. You hid your feelings or your voice because the world seemed too harsh to handle them. The shadow kept those parts of you locked away so you could survive. And now, as an adult, the question is no longer survival. The question is freedom. Are you willing to open that door again? Are you willing to meet what you left behind, to see the shame for what it really is? An old voice, an outdated guard, a memory that no longer defines you? Jung once wrote, "I'd rather be whole than good." Meeting the shadow is how we move toward wholeness, not by pretending to be perfect, not by hiding what hurts, but by bringing into the light what we once believed was too dark to face. So pause for a moment. Think of that storage room inside of you. Imagine gently opening the door. At first, you may see shame standing there, small and quiet, like a child waiting to be noticed. Meeting the shadow means stepping inside with kindness. It means saying, "You are part of me, but you do not control me." The shadow cannot be destroyed, but it can be understood. And once it is understood, it loses the power to run your life from the dark. Chapter 2. Recognizing the strings. When shame hides in the shadow, it does not just sit there silently. It finds subtle ways to reach into our lives. It pulls on invisible strings, tugging us in directions we do not always understand. Most of the time, we do not even notice. We simply feel the hesitation, the discomfort, the voice that tells us to stop, and we obey it, as if it were our own. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The strings of shame are exactly that. They guide us quietly, and because we cannot see them, we often believe This is just who I am. This is just my personality. This is just the way life works. But what if it isn't? What if those strings are not truth, but remnants of old experiences still pulling from the past? Think of a puppet on a stage. From the audience's view, the puppet appears alive, moving, dancing, bending. But the strings above are what make every gesture possible. If you only focus on the puppet, you might believe it has complete freedom. But when you look up, you see the reality. Someone else is directing the movements. In the same way, shame often acts as the hidden puppeteer of our lives. The strings may look different for each of us, but they often carry familiar patterns. One string might be self-doubt, the constant hum that questions whether you are good enough, ready enough, capable enough. Another might be the urge to please others, the instinct to say yes when you want to say no, or to smile when you feel otherwise, just to keep the peace. Another string could be the fear of failure, so powerful it convinces you to stay safe rather than risk embarrassment or rejection. Sometimes the strings are so woven into our behavior that we confuse them with our identity. We say things like, "I've always been shy," or "I'm just not confident," or "I'm a perfectionist." But what if those are not your natural traits? What if they are strings pulled by shame, trained responses that began long ago? Pause for a moment and reflect. When was the last time you wanted to do something but held back? Maybe you wanted to share an idea in a group, but you silenced yourself. Maybe you wanted to try something new, but you told yourself you would fail before you even began. These are not random moments. They are the fingerprints of shame, leaving quiet marks on your choices. Recognizing the strings does not mean criticizing yourself for having them. It means stepping back far enough to see them clearly. When you notice yourself apologizing for something small, or overthinking a decision that should be simple, or shrinking back from a chance to step forward, you can pause and ask, "Is this really me? Or is this an old string being pulled?" It is easy to believe that shame only shows up in big ways, but most often it works through the smallest gestures. A dropped gaze, a quiet laugh to cover discomfort, a sentence you swallow back instead of speaking. Shame thrives in the ordinary because the ordinary is where it hides best. And here's something to consider. Strings may be invisible, but they are not unbreakable. The first step to loosening them is awareness. Once you see the strings, they begin to lose their power. Once you recognize, this hesitation is not truth, it is shame, the grip begins to soften. Jung believed that we cannot change anything until we accept it. Recognition is that acceptance. You do not need to tear the strings off all at once. You simply need to see them for what they are. So take a gentle pause. Think about your daily life. Where do you feel those small tugs? Where do you sense hesitation that does not match your true self? Where do you hear the old whisper saying, "Don't risk it. Don't stand out. Don't be too much"? Each of these is a string. And here is the hope. The moment you notice the strings, you are no longer just the puppet. You are the one looking up, realizing there is something beyond the movements. That awareness alone is the beginning of freedom. Chapter 3. The Childhood Roots. To understand shame, we need to walk back in time, not with judgment, not to dig up every memory, but to gently see where these strings were tied in the first place. Because shame is not something we are born with. A newborn does not enter the world feeling unworthy. Shame is planted. It takes root in moments that often seem small on the surface, but leave a deep mark inside. Picture yourself as a child again. Maybe you were sitting in a classroom, excited to answer a question, your hand raised high. But instead of being celebrated, you were laughed at for getting it wrong. Or maybe you were drawing something, proud of your work, only to have someone dismiss it as silly. Or perhaps you simply asked for attention, and instead of being heard, you were met with impatience. These are not the kinds of moments adults often remember. They may even seem insignificant to those on the outside, but to a child, they are enormous. Because a child is not only absorbing information, they are learning who they are. They are learning whether their voice matters, whether their feelings count, whether it is safe to take up space. When a child feels shame, they often do not have the words to say, "That hurt me. That made me feel small." Instead, they draw a quiet conclusion about themselves. I should not speak up. I am not good enough. Something must be wrong with me. That conclusion becomes the seed, planted deep in the soil of the mind, and like all seeds, it grows. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents." Sometimes shame is passed down without anyone meaning to cause harm. Adults carry their own wounds, and without realizing it, they project them onto the child. A parent who struggled with fear of failure may push their child harshly, not seeing that they are planting the same fear in the next generation. A teacher who once felt small may unconsciously repeat that cycle with a student. Shame travels quietly from one life to another. Think of shame like a bruise on the spirit. a child falls, scrapes their knee, and the skin heals. But when shame strikes, the bruise is not on the body. It is on the heart. And because no one can see it, no one tells the child it's going to heal. So the child learns to live with it, to guard it, to walk carefully so it is not touched again. This is why many of us, as adults, still feel that sudden tightness when we are about to speak, or the sudden urge to hide when we are noticed. It is not the present moment alone. It is the echo of childhood, the bruise being touched once again. But here is something important to remember. That bruise, that root of shame, was not your fault. It was not a sign that you were weak. It was not proof that something was wrong with you. It was simply a moment, a painful moment, that your younger self did not know how to process. And so they stored it away in the shadow, where it has been waiting all this time. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Shame interrupts that process. It convinces us to become smaller versions of ourselves, versions that fit the judgments and criticisms we once received. But those roots, as old as they are, do not define who you must be today. So pause for a moment. Think of your own childhood, not to relive it, but to gently notice. Can you remember a time when you first felt not enough? Can you picture that younger version of yourself still trying to make sense of what happened? That child is still there, inside of you, carrying the roots of shame, but also carrying the possibility of healing. Chapter 4. How the Fog Follows You. When shame takes root in childhood, it rarely stays confined to the past. It travels with us. It matures alongside us. The child grows taller. The years move forward, but the feeling remains. It follows us like a fog, sometimes thick, sometimes faint, but always present. And because we have lived with it for so long, we often do not even notice it. We think it is just the weather of our lives. Carl Jung once said, "Nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent." In the same way, nothing shapes our adult choices more quietly than the unlived, unheard, unseen parts of ourselves, the parts shame told us to hide. Think of fog on a morning drive. You can still move forward, but your vision is limited. The world looks muted. The colors fade. The distance is unclear. You slow down, not because the road is blocked, but because you cannot trust what you cannot see. This is how shame operates in adulthood. It does not always stop you completely. It simply blurs your view, dampens your courage, and convinces you to move more carefully than you truly need to. Maybe you have felt it at work, hesitating to speak even when you had something valuable to share. Maybe you have felt it in daily life, second-guessing simple decisions because you feared making a mistake. Maybe you have felt it in your own private thoughts, telling yourself you are not ready, not capable, not enough. These are not random hesitations. They are the fog of old shame creeping into the present moment. The fog also has a way of dulling joy. When shame lingers, it whispers that you should not celebrate yourself too much, should not feel too proud, should not step too far into the light. It convinces you that being cautious is safer than being seen. And so, victories feel muted, and dreams feel distant. Life becomes smaller, not because it must be, but because the fog makes it look that way. And yet, there are moments when the fog thins, when you catch a glimpse of what life could feel like without it. Maybe you remember a time when you were laughing freely, or when you accomplished something despite your fear, or when you allowed yourself to step forward without hesitation. In those moments, the fog lifts just enough for you to see clearly. There is a fuller self within you, waiting to breathe. But shame is persistent. It often returns quickly, whispering, "Don't get used to this. Don't get too comfortable." And if we are not aware, we accept its return as natural. The truth is, shame thrives on invisibility. As long as you believe the fog is just the weather, you will keep moving through it slowly, carefully, never realizing the sun has always been above it. Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." The fog loses its hold the moment you look within and recognize it for what it is. So ask yourself gently, where does the fog appear in your life? Where do you feel hesitation that does not make sense? Where do you find yourself holding back, not because you lack the ability, but because something inside warns you to stay small? Recognizing the fog does not clear it all at once, but it does give you a choice. You can begin to walk with awareness, to say, "This heaviness I feel is not the truth of who I am. It is shame, and shame may be part of my story, but it is not the whole of me." And here lies the hopeful reminder. Fog is temporary. It drifts in and out, but it never erases the sun. The light is always there, waiting to break through. The more we see shame clearly, the more the fog begins to thin. And with each step forward, confidence grows a little brighter. Chapter 5. Reclaiming Confidence. If shame is the fog that follows us, then reclaiming confidence is the act of learning to see through it, step by step. It is not about pretending the fog isn't there. It is not about forcing yourself to be fearless. It is about learning to walk forward with awareness, knowing that the fog is real, but also knowing that the sun above it is just as real. Carl Jung once wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Those words carry so much hope. They remind us that the roots of shame may run deep, but they are not our destiny. The leash that shame tugs on can be loosened. The strings can be cut, slowly and gently. Confidence is not something we have to chase outside of ourselves. It is something we uncover within ourselves once we stop letting shame steal it away. The first step in reclaiming confidence is to acknowledge the shadow. Remember the storage room we spoke of earlier, where you placed all the parts of yourself you thought were too much or not enough. Meeting the shadow means opening that door. It means saying, "I see what is in here. I see the moments I tried to forget. I see the feelings I once hid. And I am willing to face them now." This is not easy. It takes courage to face what you once ran from. But the moment you acknowledge the shadow, you begin to take back your power. Because now you are no longer running. You are standing still, looking directly at what has always been there. The second step is to name the shame. Words are powerful. They bring shape to things that otherwise feel like endless fog. When you feel yourself shrinking, you can pause and quietly say, "This is shame." Speaking. Not truth, not fact, not reality, just shame. And in that moment, the fog becomes less convincing. Naming the shame also helps separate your identity from the voice of shame. Instead of saying, "I am not good enough," you learn to say, "Shame is telling me I am not good enough." That small shift creates space. And in that space, confidence has room to breathe. The third step is to reparent yourself. This means offering kindness to the child you once were. Imagine them sitting across from you, still carrying the bruise of those old moments, still believing they were not enough. What would you say to them now, as the adult you are today? You would not criticize them. You would not dismiss them. You would reassure them. You would say, "You are okay. You are valuable. You are allowed to be seen." Every time you offer compassion to your younger self, you loosen shame's grip on your present self. Because shame is rooted in old conclusions you once drew as a child. And compassion is how you rewrite them. The fourth step is to take small acts of courage. Confidence does not return all at once. It grows slowly, like a tender plant pushing through the cracks in concrete. Each time you take a risk, however small, you give that plant sunlight. Speaking up in a meeting, trying something new, allowing yourself to be proud of a success instead of downplaying it. Each act, no matter how small, stretches the leash of shame. And over time, the leash frays and weakens. Do not underestimate these small acts. A single seed becomes a tree. A single step becomes a path. Courage compounds. And with each step, you begin to see yourself differently. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to remember that confidence is not about never feeling afraid. It is about choosing to step forward, even when fear whispers. Jung once said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. Reclaiming confidence will look different for everyone. For one person, it might mean speaking up. For another, it might mean finally resting without guilt. For someone else, it might mean taking a risk that once felt impossible. The point is not to copy someone else's version of confidence. The point is to find your own. So pause for a moment and ask yourself gently, what is one small act of courage I can take? Not tomorrow, not next week, but today. Something within reach. Something that stretches you, but does not overwhelm you. Something that gives that tender plant of confidence just a little more sunlight. Because each act is proof. Proof that you are not the shadow. Proof that you are not the strings. Proof that the fog may linger, but it cannot define you. Proof that you can choose who you become. Reclaiming confidence is not about perfection. It is about presence. It is about stepping forward, even shakily, and discovering that your voice matters, your steps matter, your being matters. And with each step, the leash of shame grows weaker, until one day you realize it is no longer holding you at all. Chapter 6. The Masks We Wear. When shame grows roots inside of us, it rarely lets us walk around bare. Instead, it urges us to cover up, to protect ourselves with masks. These masks are not made of wood or porcelain. They are made of behaviors, of attitudes, of roles we step into so others will not see the parts of ourselves we fear are unworthy. Carl Jung once wrote, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is." The persona is the mask we wear to meet the world. It is not evil, nor is it false in every way. It is a survival tool. But when it grows too heavy, it begins to replace who we truly are. Think about a child who once felt small in a classroom. They may grow into an adult who wears the mask of silence, staying quiet so they are never laughed at again. Another child who once felt dismissed may grow into someone who wears the mask of perfectionism, striving endlessly so they are never criticized. Some of us wear the mask of busyness, filling every moment so no one sees the stillness inside. Others wear the mask of cheerfulness, smiling even when we feel broken, because we fear that sadness will drive others away. Masks serve a purpose. They shield us. They give us a way to move through life without being exposed to the full sting of shame. But over time, they also become prisons. When you always wear the mask of perfectionism, you cannot allow yourself to rest. When you always wear the mask of silence, your voice begins to atrophy. When you always wear the mask of cheerfulness, you lose touch with your deeper emotions. The danger of masks is that they not only hide us from others, they also hide us from ourselves. You may begin to forget what your real face looks like. You may confuse the role you play with the person you truly are. Have you ever felt exhausted by your own efforts to keep up appearances? Have you ever sensed that people admire you for the mask you wear, not for the person underneath? That quiet exhaustion is the weight of shame pressing against your authentic self, reminding you that something is missing. But here is the truth. Masks are not permanent. They can be lifted. You do not have to rip them off suddenly. That would be frightening. Instead, you can slowly loosen them, piece by piece, moment by moment. The first step is simply to notice. When do you feel the mask slipping on? Perhaps before a meeting, when you force yourself to sound more confident than you feel. Perhaps in a conversation, when you smile to avoid showing sadness. Perhaps in your daily routine, when you keep yourself endlessly busy so you never have to sit still. Just noticing the mask is the beginning of freedom. The second step is to ask, what am I protecting? Because beneath every mask is an old bruise. The mask of perfectionism hides the bruise of criticism. The mask of silence hides the bruise of ridicule. The mask of cheerfulness hides the bruise of rejection. When you see the bruise, you begin to understand why the mask was needed. You can thank it for protecting you. And then, slowly, you can begin to set it down. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Masks keep us from that privilege. But the moment you allow yourself to remove one, even for a second, you feel the air on your skin again. You remember what it is like to be unhidden. And although it may feel vulnerable, it also feels real. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, what mask do I wear most often? Is it perfection? Is it silence? Is it cheerfulness? Is it busyness? Can I imagine taking it off, even just a little, even just for a moment? Because behind the mask, your true face has been waiting all along. And your true face, unguarded, authentic, imperfect, is where real confidence lives. Chapter 7. Listening to the inner critic. If masks are the ways we hide from the world, the inner critic is the voice we hide from inside ourselves. It is the echo of shame, repeating in words what once was felt in moments. And for many of us, it has become so familiar that we hardly notice it anymore. It speaks in the background of our daily lives, shaping the way we move, the choices we make, the risks we avoid. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The inner critic is one of those unconscious forces. Left unseen, it becomes a kind of script we unknowingly follow. Think about the words your critic uses. Maybe it says, "You're not smart enough," or "Who do you think you are?" or "You're going to fail, so don't even try." These words often sound absolute. They sound like truth. But in reality, they are memories speaking. They are the voices of old moments, a teacher's harsh tone, a parent's disappointment, a peer's ridicule, frozen in time, replaying themselves in your mind. The inner critic, in its strange way, is trying to protect you. It thinks if it warns you not to speak, you won't be humiliated. If it tells you not to try, you won't fail. If it convinces you to stay small, you won't be hurt. In childhood, this voice may have helped you survive painful experiences, but as an adult, it does not protect you anymore. It limits you. Imagine the inner critic as a guard standing at the doorway of your life. It holds a lantern, pointing out every possible danger. Don't step there. Don't go too far. Don't let them see you. The guard believes it is keeping you safe, but in reality, it is keeping you locked inside. What if, instead of fighting this guard, you listened to it, not as truth, but as history? When it says, "You're not good enough," you could pause and ask, whose voice is this, really? Where did I first learn to believe this? By asking, you begin to trace the string back to its root. And often, you will find it does not belong to you at all. It is borrowed from someone else's fear, someone else's wound. This is how listening to the inner critic becomes powerful, not by obeying it, not by silencing it, but by understanding it, by saying, I hear you. I know you are trying to protect me, but I am not that child anymore. I do not need this protection in the same way. Over time, the critic grows quieter when it is acknowledged. Like a child throwing a tantrum, it shouts louder when ignored. But when you listen calmly, when you meet it with patience instead of panic, it begins to soften. Jung once said, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality." The inner critic is part of that shadow, and meeting it requires courage because it forces us to confront the parts of ourselves we would rather avoid. But in doing so, we also reclaim our freedom. So the next time the critic speaks, pause. Do not rush to argue with it. Do not let it dictate your choices. Simply notice. Listen. Ask where it came from. And then remind yourself gently, this is not the voice of my present self. This is the voice of my past. Chapter 8. The Power of Self-Acceptance. If the inner critic is the voice that divides us, then self-acceptance is the act of bringing ourselves back together. It is the moment we stop treating parts of ourselves as enemies and instead welcome them home. And though the word may sound simple, self-acceptance is one of the most powerful and most difficult steps in reclaiming our confidence. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Why terrifying? Because self-acceptance means facing everything, not only the parts of us we are proud of, but also the parts we have hidden, the parts we have judged, the parts shame convinced us were unworthy. To accept ourselves completely is to open the storage room of the shadow and say, "You belong too." Think of yourself as a mosaic. Each piece of glass, each shard of color, represents an experience, a trait, a part of who you are. Some pieces are bright and polished. Your kindness, your talents, your achievements. Others are cracked or dark. Your mistakes, your fears, your insecurities. For years, shame teaches us to push those darker pieces aside, to pretend they are not part of us. But a mosaic missing pieces is not whole. It is only when we bring them all together that the full picture emerges. Self-acceptance is not saying, "I love every part of myself instantly." It is saying, "I am willing to sit with every part of myself, even the parts I do not yet understand, even the parts I have resisted." It is a posture of openness, a softening toward who you are instead of a constant battle against yourself. Many of us believe confidence comes from perfection, from polishing away every flaw, from finally becoming the person who never falters. But Jung reminds us of something different. He said, "I would rather be whole than good." To be whole means to embrace both light and shadow, both strength and weakness, both joy and sorrow. Confidence grows not from being flawless, but from being real. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, not the kind of mirror that only reflects your appearance, but a mirror of the self. When you look into it, you see every layer: the child you once were, the mistakes you made, the strengths you built, the fears you still carry. For most of us, the first instinct is to look away. But what if, just for a moment, you stayed? What if you looked and said, "This is me. Not perfect, not finished, but worthy, exactly as I am." That moment, even if brief, is where self-acceptance begins. It does not mean you stop growing. It does not mean you never change. But it means you no longer treat yourself as the enemy while you grow. You no longer say, "I will accept myself once I achieve this, once I fix that." You say, "I accept myself now, even as I continue becoming." And there is power in that. Because the parts of ourselves we resist the most are often the parts that hold hidden gifts. The sensitivity you once saw as weakness may be the root of your compassion. The mistakes you once hated may be the soil where wisdom has grown. The fears you once tried to silence may point you toward what matters most deeply to you. Self-acceptance is the act of turning toward yourself with kindness. It is speaking to yourself the way you would speak to someone you love. It is giving yourself permission to be human. So pause for a moment. Place your hand gently over your chest. Breathe in and say quietly to yourself, "I accept who I am in this moment. Not who you were yesterday. Not who you will be tomorrow. Who you are right now." That simple sentence, repeated often, becomes like sunlight on the fog. It does not clear it all at once, but it begins to warm you, to remind you that beneath the shame, beneath the masks, beneath the critic, there is someone whole. And that wholeness is where real confidence is born. Chapter 9. Small steps toward wholeness. Wholeness may sound like a distant mountain, something far away that only a few people ever reach. But the truth is, wholeness is not a single mountaintop moment. It is built in small steps, in quiet choices, in gentle practices that slowly reshape the way we live. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." This means growth is not instant, and it is not always easy. But it also means we do not need to make giant leaps. We only need to take steady steps, steps that feel possible, steps that bring us closer to ourselves. Think of wholeness like a garden. You do not plant an entire forest in one day. You plant one seed, you water it, you give it light, and slowly it grows. Each small action, repeated with care, becomes part of the transformation. One step toward wholeness is journaling. Writing down your thoughts, even for 5 minutes a day, allows you to see the fog more clearly. Words take the shapeless feelings of shame and give them form, and once they have form, you can work with them. It does not have to be beautiful writing. It does not have to make sense. It is simply a way of saying to yourself, I am willing to listen. Another step is practicing small acts of kindness toward yourself. For many, this feels unnatural at first. We are used to being harsh with ourselves, to pushing, correcting, judging. But imagine speaking to yourself the way you would to someone you love. A gentle reminder instead of a harsh command. A patient word instead of criticism. Over time, these tiny shifts begin to soften the critic and nurture acceptance. A third step is pausing when shame arises. Instead of rushing past it, notice it. Place a hand on your heart, breathe, and name it. This is shame. Then ask yourself, what would I tell a child who felt this way? And give yourself the same answer. This moment of pause interrupts the old patterns. It shows you that you do not have to obey shame's voice. A fourth step is celebrating small wins. Shame loves to shrink joy. It whispers, that doesn't count. That's not enough. But each time you celebrate a small step, finishing a task, speaking up once, resting when you needed it, you train yourself to see growth instead of only seeing lack. And confidence grows strongest in these moments of acknowledgement. Jung once said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." Your steps toward wholeness do not need to look like anyone else's. For some, it might be journaling. For others, it might be walking in nature. For someone else, it might be simply sitting quietly for a few minutes a day without distraction. The point is not what the step looks like. The point is that it is yours. And perhaps the most important step of all is patience. Wholeness does not arrive overnight. Just as fog lifts slowly, just as bruises heal gradually, your confidence and self-acceptance will grow in their own time. Each step is enough. Each step is progress. So ask yourself gently, what is one small step I can take today? Not tomorrow, not a grand plan for the future, but today. Perhaps it is writing one honest sentence in a journal. Perhaps it is choosing kind words when the critic speaks. Perhaps it is allowing yourself a moment of rest without guilt. Whatever it is, take it. Let it be your seed. Shame may still whisper. The critic may still appear. The masks may still feel tempting. But now you know how to see them. Now you know they are not the truth of who you are. They are old stories, old bruises, old protections that no longer serve you. And because you can see them, you can choose differently. You can choose to pause when the fog rolls in. You can choose to celebrate the smallest steps. You can choose to speak kindly to yourself when the critic tries to shout. You can choose to live not as the masked version of you, but as the real, imperfect, beautiful whole of you. I hope this video was helpful. If this resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts or experiences. Thanks for watching.